It's so obvious, this one, don't pre-order games. There's no reason to pre-order games these days. There's literally no reason, because you download games, Not many people buy
Mm.
physical copies of games. Why are you doing this? It's
Yeah,
just...
it's like you're pre-ordering. Like surely the whole aspect of pre-ordering it is that so that you make sure you get your copy on day
On
one.
day, what, right, uh-huh.
But people are now pre-ordering them on the PlayStation Store, which is like a digital marketplace. You get a code for a download. It's like there's no like there's no shortage of copies that are like on the internet. You know what I mean? So yeah,
Yes.
it's maybe like for the PS5, for example, where there was a shot. This is a hardware. This gets sent out to your house.
Sure,
And
that makes sense,
I
right?
realize I'm putting my hand over here all the time. My PS5 is next to me. I'm touching it.
So that was
Yeah,
patting
yeah.
it, yeah,
I'm
okay.
like looking over and I'm like, my PS5.
Precious.
It was there's like, this is a hardware. It's like something that gets sent out to your house. There's a reason to pre-order that because there's only a certain number of these. 3, 2, 1. Freedom Day, come and gone, Lewis. Monday, what date was it on Monday? Don't know, the 9th or something. That's it. Restrictions are gone in Scotland.
Oh, yeah.
Need to wear masks still, though, unfortunately. But
Well, not that free then. It's been free. We've been free in England for weeks now, absolutely weeks, and yeah, it doesn't feel very free. Everyone's still wearing masks.
it feels a bit off balance for me because I was down in Bristol that week before, so it actually was like out clubbing. But to celebrate the first weekend we can go out, we're having a house party. So
I mean,
I was like, looking
I
forward to going
imagine.
out though.
Oh, right, okay, uh-huh. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm just looking forward to being in a room with a bunch of people and not worrying about it. Yeah, I think a house party seems like a perfect day, a perfect way to celebrate Freedom Day, man. I hadn't even thought about that. That lines it perfectly.
yeah. Although I think after the next few weeks after that, it's going to be quite, wild. People are going to be like going out all the time. I suppose to go out in a club, it probably would be extremely packed, especially here. This weekend it's going to be absolutely full everywhere. There's going to be no point in even going somewhere because you won't get in.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. Uh-huh. And also, dude, it's going to be mental. Like, as like you and I went to one club, and immediately after that club, I got a cold. It's like it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. Fuck it.
Yeah, I never thought about all of the like common colds and like
The
the
other
flus and stuff like
stuff,
that are like going around that you wouldn't have caught over the last year. Because they will have developed like variants as well that you haven't been catching because you've been inside.
right?
So it's super likely that once we go out again, we are going to get a bunch of like colds and things like that, and
Yeah,
we're all going to be super ill for a while.
yeah, man, it's just going to be like freshers. As I said, I fucking tested myself like 4 times because I was absolutely convinced it was COVID. But no, it's just like common flu. I was like, that's going to take a wee while to get used to that one. But you know,
Yeah. So if you didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a conversational podcast between two friends, Lewis and I, discussing topical issues and trying to navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
each week Scott and I will think of a topic that's been kicking around in our minds, and we bring that to the show. And then each of us, for one after the other, we will break down our topics, disseminate our views, and then we'll hopefully try to reach some new conclusions that we wouldn't be able to reach on our own.
Yep. Pretty hyped for this week, Lewis.
Oh, I see what you did there. Yeah,
I'm getting good at that.
thank you. Yeah, making it nice and easy for me. Yeah, I'm wanting to talk about. This might be a little bit of a weird one this week, is because I have like a general theme and then like kind of just a couple of examples, because it's not exactly something that I've like read about in the paper or anything like that this week. It's just been a thought process that's kind of kicked around in my head the last couple of years, and that's this whole, as I'm calling it, like, the concept of like hype in marketing. So when basically what I'm meaning is like when businesses use your excitement and your what's what I'm looking for here, your
I think
speculation.
excitement's good, yeah.
Yeah, excitement, and that they basically sell you your speculation about a product instead of actually selling you the product itself, which is, I think, really, really a simple concept. And what I'll be quite interested to find out when we talk about this is whether this is even worth discussing. I don't know if this is something that's just so inherent in all human conditioning that it's just a non-issue, or whether we'll actually think about it a little bit deeper and think to ourselves, maybe there are some examples of this in the real world in which people could potentially be taken advantage of. So I tried to think for a really simple example just to make sure we're on the same page here. And I thought to myself immediately, what a good example of hype marketing would be the PS5, or the sale of the PS5, or just like consoles in general. Because the thought process I was coming from was that these are, the products which like are sold in like 7 yearly cycles. But the product itself isn't actually what you're interested in. What you want to get is the games, and the product allows you to use the games. So what's what Sony, what Microsoft do, they'll collaborate with other companies, and then they'll come up with like day one release games that are going to come out when the console is released, and they'll like go to conferences and that type of thing. And basically the whole concept is to get you hyped out your fucking nut. And I will end up talking about gaming hype as well, because I think that's really really important here. But it's basically an example of this marketing, and it seems to be extremely effective. I know we've had like shortages in that this year, so obviously PS5s are not available and never will be available, but the amount of hype that was surrounding that console when it came out was absolutely mind-blowing. And apart from Demon Souls, I'm not exactly sure why. And
Yeah,
Destiny.
I think there have been like 2 or 3 like first person exclusive games, and by first person exclusive I mean like companies that are owned by Sony.
Yeah.
So Sony and Microsoft basically have this war going on, and they both own like independent studios that make games for their platforms. And I think there's only been like 2 or 3 games that Sony owned studios have developed and produced on the PS. There have been games that studios have brought out that have been on the Xbox as well and the PC, but Sony own like studios that specifically develop games for the PlayStation. And I think there's only been like 3 that have exclusively came out on the PlayStation. So it hasn't really justified its purchase right now.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean by the whole like hype marketing thing. Although what I'm wondering about it is the hype justified for the product that came out? So when I think about the PS5, I know that it's quite a powerful console. I know that it sort of lines up with some low-end PCs these days. You know, it has like this sort of processing.
Like middling, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so the processing power of some like midline PCs. When the first thing that I went to was like the iPhone. I went to like the next iteration of the iPhone, how they have like a conference for that, and they bring up your hype for it, even though the system doesn't actually have much else. Like if you didn't get the iPhone 12 and you had the iPhone 11, you wouldn't really miss out on anything. Whereas like the PS4 to the PS5, quite a technological jump, even though they both do the hype marketing. They're both on that train.
Yeah, well, that's great actually, because one of the examples I wanted to talk about specifically was the tech industry, or even more specifically, phones itself. It's because I think there's like a really what's interesting here is that we'll have like several different companies that approach hype marketing in really really similar ways, but I think the result of these can end up being really really different. So like you said with the PS4, to me it's not really an issue. Like they're building the hype because at the end of the day they don't really have much else to sell, and the console they are selling allows you to play other games type of thing, so it almost fits. But when I started thinking of examples of hype, the obvious example to me was like the tech industry. It's because obviously like everyone knows like, how expensive and how expensive the latest smartphones are, and I still think that maybe the majority, I don't know if the majority, but most people that buy new phones as soon as they're released are doing it purely for like the prestige or the status. I think there's like a lot of people that will do that just because they want other people to know that they can afford the latest iPhone.
Sure. We call them idiots.
Yes, wankers.
Yeah.
But more money in sense. But there's also an entire other market there, which you and I really aren't part of, I don't think. And that is like the tech geeks. You know, see people that are like really, really into trends and really, really on top of these sort of things. And the people that actually get hyped for the release of a new phone. It's because like obviously these people that buy phones just have a status symbol. I don't think they're looking forward to their new next status symbol. You know, they're just going to get it. I don't think
they don't even know what the new phone can do that your current phone can have. I remember, because I'm one of these people, I'm not very tech savvy, so I don't really know. I know the new PS5. The reason that I got the new PS5 is because it's going to have the next generation of games on it. Like eventually the PS4 will stop being able to play these games, so I'm going to have to buy the PS5. And that's pretty much it for me. I don't really give a shit what's inside it. I just want to play the newest games. But I remember specifically one time when I was in uni where a couple of my friends who are quite tech savvy, they worked in like Maplin and stuff like that.
Right.
A new phone was coming out and they all got different versions. One of them got a Samsung, one of them got like is it Huawei,
yeah.
they all got like different phones that had different operating systems and things like that, and they were wondering whose was the best technologically. So they basically downloaded this like program. It was like a video, and it was like a really computationally demanding video that your phone could run.
And like
basically,
a showcase.
depending on how fast and how smooth your phone could run it, it basically showcased the technological capability. So it like rendered the images and all the things that were floating about the screen, and they like put their phones side by side and saw whose phone was running it better. And I was like, this seems like like the
Yeah.
dumbest thing ever. I'm like, I'm not interested in this whatsoever. But
Sure.
obviously, being technologically savvy, they were interested in it, and they bought the phone so that it was technologically capable. You know,
Yeah.
this is the audience you're talking about, I think.
It's exactly what I'm talking about. I kind of can't help agree with you. To me, it seems somewhat contrived. You know, it's like if you need to download a specially high intensive rendered in real time video in order just to test the specs of your system, why the fuck are you going out and buying this crazy fancy phone? You know, it's like
Yeah, I like the idea that they bought that app, they ran it, they were like, "Oh, my phone's
they
better than
bought
yours."
the
Then they closed the app and went back to Reddit.
yeah. YouTube probably Minecraft.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. Yeah, that's the example I wanted to talk about. It's because like it's kind of weird. I understand how it works. I get that these people do it, but like I started thinking about some of the features that they sell phones with, that they use to sell phones these days, particularly just like particularly into like 2020 and 2021. Because like the reality is, when you think about it, each generation of phone that comes out has some new gimmick, you know. Literally it's just some selling point. And like recently in years, we've seen cameras, we've seen lots and lots of fucking cameras. Like you and I will remember.
Instagram, man, Instagram.
Oh, it's crazy though, because like you like back way when phones were first added, when cameras were first added to phones, you know, you're limited to like 500 half a megabyte resolution, and then it jumped up to 2. A couple of years later, everyone was cutting around with 5 megapixel. Like I remember the Motorola was like, oh, that's, if you want to take a good picture, that's the phone. You get a Motorola type of thing. And then a couple of years later, all of a sudden, folk are cutting about with like 64 gigabyte phones, and these days we're up to like 100 or odd gigabytes. And then obviously the studio started realizing that like there's literally no point. Well, actually, the reality is that the optics that's in these phones have reached what's called the Rayleigh criterion, which basically means that it's impossible to resolve things in any finer detail. So it's like, shit, well, we can't add any more cameras, can't add any more sensors. What we're going to do, some fucking genius in this room must have been like, why don't we just add a second camera, you know? So like, oh shit, that's perfect. Then another company was like, oh shit, they've got 2 cameras. Why don't we add a third camera? And now these days there are literally like my girlfriend Megan, she has a phone, and some of the phones that they sell have 6 separate cameras on them. But the fact that it's easy to tell that this is nothing but a marketing gimmick is because they'll have the main camera, which is like 64 megabytes. Then they'll have like a wide angle camera, and obviously wide angle is one that captures more field of view. So naturally, if you have more field of view, there are more things to image. You'd want there to be a higher resolution camera, right? But the wide angle is only 2 megabytes, you know. The zoom lens is only half a megabyte. So it's just like, it's a great example of things that are being added to these purely for marketing. There's no one, I don't know, like, are people actually sitting there actually buying fucking phones thinking to themselves like, oh, I can't wait till I get that 5th camera. You know, I see the photography I'm going to be taking on my Samsung, it's going to blow people away. Is that? Surely not.
I don't think people maybe they think that. I don't think they take a photo with the new phone, and there's probably like a bit of a placebo effect where they take a new photo and they compare it with an old photo and like, well, that looks so much better, doesn't it? Even though looking at like the same photograph, like there's probably something like that. I'm not sure they actually do see any difference. I think it's more about the new iPhone,
I think it's the feel,
the new iteration. It's not. I truly don't believe, because it's like kids these days as well. It's like they're getting brought up in this culture. Like when we were at school, I remember I was speaking to a friend about this today, about how when you go into school and like clothing was all about like branding. So like when you had like a non-uniform day, everyone came in with their best clothes on, and it was like
raw, man, yeah.
Whoever had the best clothes was like the coolest, and anyone that didn't have those clothes got ripped to shreds for it.
Sure.
You know, like I don't think these days it's about clothing anymore. Now it's more about like your iPad or your phone. Really? It's like if you've not got the new, if you've still got the iPhone 9, like you're just a fucking loser, you know.
God, that's horrific, man. That's actually horrific.
It's caustic as fuck.
Sure, we had to buy a Soviet V-neck for school, you know, but those are like £40, not $1.5 grand to the latest iPhone, man. Yeah, that's pretty horrific. There's actually like tons of examples of features that are added to these phones with each and every single generation. It's because like phones now are actually on approximately a 6-month development cycle, you know. Like they'll bring out one iteration of the phone, then they'll bring out the XL iteration or the S iteration or the whatever, and that'll basically be the same phone with a different processor. And then 6 months later, they'll bring out the new phone, you know. So like we're going over phones at such an incredibly massive rate, and it seems like the things that they're trying to come up with in order to sell as extra features are just getting ridiculous now. Like see with the latest generation of phones that came out start of this year and last year, you can now watch videos in 8K resolution. In 8K. I don't know anyone that uses 4K. You can get access to 5G, which isn't going to be out for another 5 years. You will have a new phone by then, but you can pay extra for a 5G compatible phone. Another one is FPS. You know, I don't.
Sure.
Apparently, most phones run at 60 FPS, and they have for years and years and years. But now all of a sudden, like, people are offering phones at 120, and it's like, I cannot imagine what you'll be doing on your goddamn smartphone that's going to require that amount of FPS, as well as like now it's standard to find a smartphone with like 10 gig of RAM, which is more than my laptop, which I edit these videos on.
Yeah, I'm well aware that your laptop has limitations in its
That's a piece of
technology.
shit, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think the only time that I've ever really been interested in that kind of stuff, I know that 4K is like going to be the new thing, but I know 4K hasn't even caught on yet. So not majorly in a huge way. By the time I've got a new phone, maybe 4K is going to be in then. My phone will have 4K. I don't know. I'm pretty sure my phone right now can't do 4K. The PS5 can do 4K, I think, but there's like it can only do 4K at like 60 frames per second, I think.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So you can't do 120 frames per second. And this is about as far as my technology confirmation goes. If you're playing like a game that requires like good reaction time, you want frames as opposed to pixels.
Resolution,
So your game's running smoother. So I went out and got a monitor that could do like 120 FPS, which was only like a couple £100, so it wasn't that bad. And I like play it on that, and I can see the difference. You know, I can see the difference between like 60 and 120 frames per second. And when I look at like 1080 and I look at 4K, I can see the difference in those resolutions, but it's not mind blowing me to the point where I'm like, I could never go back anymore. You know what I mean? That's not that big a jump. There's not enough to like justify it. Like, what more is that really giving me? If I'm to watch a film in 4K over 1080, the film would have to be really graphically pleasing. And at the end of the day, I'm not really watching a film for that. You know what I mean? It might be a good addition to it, but like the film's dog shit. I'm not going to watch it just because it's got 4K graphics.
Sure. But even then, like what we're talking about here, like it's true. Like frame rate is important for games, and like fidelity. It makes sense. You'd want a movie to be in HD, but we're talking about a phone screen, which is like 4 inches across,
Yeah.
That's the crazy part for me. But like the main takeaway here is that like there's these like features which are being added every single year, and from what I understand, this is the reason why phone prices cost fucking $2,000 for a flagship now. So when you think of what makes up a phone, there's not many components. You'll need like connections for like Wi-Fi and 3G. You need like processors. You probably need a camera, but other than that, a lot of it's just fluff. Like so my phone, it's a Samsung, and I quite like it, but like it has this fancy holographic back cover, and it's literally that's all it does. And don't get me wrong, I think it's pretty, but like, how much value did I pay for that goddamn back screen? How much extra did I pay for facial recognition, which I'm never ever going to use? I can't help but feel that one of the side effects of introducing more and more of these features in order to build hype, in order to generate more sales and excitement in the industry, is that they also are able to effectively increase their margins, because they keep adding and adding new things to phones. That's just another component which we can get an extra 40% profit out of.
Sure. Yeah. The money that they charge for like phones these days doesn't seem to be absolutely obscene. I think like maybe 15 years ago or something, when phones were just sort of on the brink of coming out and people were starting to get like mobile phones and using them all the time. Like I think about my Walkman or the Motorola or whatever it was at the time. I don't think that the price that phone was then compared to what the price is now, surely that doesn't scale with like how the market has expanded. I have no evidence for that whatsoever. Well, but I can't imagine that because they're like 10 times more expensive now. Yep. And the market can't have inflated like that much. So, but they can do a whole load of other stuff. Like technology has ramped up to probably the phones we have these days are way more than 10 times more powerful than the phones we had back then. So, it does. First of all, it confuses me that they're so expensive on like a 6-monthly cycle, like you say. Second of all, it confuses me that people have enough money to continually get new ones. Like there must be people out there that do get these on a 6-monthly basis, and it's like, how much money are you spending on like these phones for features that you're never going to use and for like gimmicks that you don't even need or
You,
want.
yeah, you'll never even read about them. It's fucking, it's kind of infuriating. It's because like this is the marketing strategy here literally leads to this end result where we have people with inflated, bogged up phones that have too much on them, and it ends up increasing the price. And it's just like such a, it's a, I think it's quite a nice example, like as you just said there, of hype causing innovation, which ends up causing a negative effect for the viewers. To mention that previous point you said, which is quite interesting, it's I actually I read about this myself one point as well, but how we're charging so much more for phones and where it comes from. And basically, it was all to do with Apple. It's because before Apple, most phone companies thought there was a limit to how much they could charge for a phone. They thought that, like, you know, I remember the iPhone 4 was £400, and that was like at the time it was the most expensive phone in the market. And
Oh
the one
yeah.
after that, and like for the first iPhone, from the iPhone 4 to like the 7, it went up by like £100 every single time, pretty much. And every single time it continued to sell better than the rest. And then every single time, the rest of the market released a phone which matched Apple so that they could charge an equivalent price point. Basically, the idea was that people didn't think the market would ever be willing to pay that price. And then companies started to realize that phones now actually are like, glasses are a bit squint there. Phones now are like, they're not a luxury good. They are like a car, and people are willing to spend absorbent amounts of money. It's just that no one was willing to do that. So Apple effectively increased that single-handedly, and this was through a combination of increasing the price just to see what the market cap is. Turns out there isn't a cap, and on top of that, adding these features every single year, you know, and that's where they could justify increasing the price was by adding these features.
I remember the iPhone 4 being that expensive. I remember it being about £400, but I also remember the iPhone 4 being the one that really changed the game.
Sure.
And it really being the phone, because I didn't have I think I had what was considered a smartphone before that. I had the Google phone before that, which was called the G1.
Mm.
And it was like amazing because it had like this touch screen, and it also had like it was a slider, but it slid out to the side, so it was like, you know,
Slick, man.
it was like long ways, and it
Yeah.
slid out like that, and then there was a keyboard underneath, so you had like a full key. It was, dude,
sounds
I
brilliant.
loved that phone.
Really?
It was honestly so good. But I had this phone anyway, and it broke. So when it did, I had it for years and years and years, and when it broke, that was when I was like, okay, maybe I should get one of these like iPhones now, because like everyone at school had like the iPod Touch, and then moved on to the iPhone after that when the iPod sort of like went out of commission. And the iPhone 4 is where I remember it becoming like almost necessary to have a smartphone. It was like, now you're gonna have to have one of these, and like the £400 price point really isn't that bad because this thing does everything for you, you know.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was a technological jump from any phone that you had before that sort of justified the increase in price. But then when the iPhone 5 came out, it was like, oh, the camera's a bit better, the screen's a bit
And it's a
wider.
bit longer as well. Remember, that was an extra £100 right there for that extra row at the bottom.
Yeah, they give you like a tiny bit more screen
Yeah.
to the point now where like people that have these new iPhones these days can't fucking touch the top corner of the screen.
Yeah, exactly,
And
man.
but they think it's a good thing, you know.
Yeah, they're convinced.
But I remember the iPhone 4 being a massive technological jump, and then when it got to the iPhone 5 being like, this phone's kind of dog shit. Like, there's no reason that you're paying like another £100 for this phone. It does sort of the same things as the iPhone 4. Like, there's no reason. I had the 4S for like, I think it was like 5-6 years. It was like onto the iPhone like 8 and 9 before I broke that phone, had to get a new one.
Yeah, I distinctly remember that I started with the 4 as well. Before that, I had just a flip phone, and I had like, it didn't even have a touch screen, but it didn't have, you know, in the middle you had like the up, down, left, right arrows. Well, those weren't buttons. That was the touch screen, and it was cool, man. Samsung E900. But after that was when, before then, if you had like an iPhone 3, and folk in high school would be like, oh shit, you know, he's got an iPhone 3. That's pretty cool. People expected you to have the iPhone 4, you know, and like I think people actually that might have had like Samsungs might have been a bit like, fucking rocking a Samsung, what a wee cheap bastard type of thing. But I remember when I went from the 4 to the 5, and I like went through the process, you know, you're excited, you're getting your new phone, you open up the new phone, download all your apps, and I was like, I remember like I'd upgraded it, I got all my shit from the cloud, and I was like, oh, that's it. There's nothing new to do here. This is literally the exact same phone and one tier longer. And ever since going from the iPhone 4 to the iPhone 5, getting a new phone just hasn't meant anything to me. because that's where it really struck home. I was like, this is the exact same. Like, I'm being sold nothing here, and all these features they keep coming out with year after year. There are a few that are handy. I quite like the the passcode, which you use your finger to like get in your phone. I quite
Sure.
like, and it's definitely better that phones are like getting more resistant to water. That seems like something we can all agree on. But
Hmm.
pretty much every other feature in these phones, to me, is just excessive. I wish there was budget versions of phones available. That's what mine was supposed to be anyway.
Yeah, that's what kind of confuses me about these phones. And yeah, just to harp on that point there, yeah, I remember the first time that I upgraded from the 4S was because the iPhone 6 came out with like a small version. It was like called the
Yeah,
SE,
yeah,
and I got that version because it was like much cheaper and it did the same things as like the 6 Plus, but the screen was smaller. I was like, I don't give a shit about that.
hmm
But yeah, it confuses me when people get these new phones because it must be like you're saying, they must like, oh, the box, oh, unwrap,
yeah.
open, turn on,
My
download
new
the apps,
charger. Ooh,
and then after they've like opened it and downloaded the apps, it's like what where do you see the value in like the money that you've spent there, like and the ability to tell somebody else that you've now got the 11 and not the 10?
Sure.
Because like you don't, the vast majority of these people must do like nothing new on the phone. They just like load the apps back up and they go straight back onto Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Reddit or whatever it is they do, Snapchat, and it's like there's no more benefits to having that phone. They don't enjoy these things anymore. They can just say that they have it, you know?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's like that's what you paid like a grand and a half for, like just to say that you now have this. Like
Yeah.
I
You're
don't
a
understand where
sucker.
people are seeing the benefits of that. Where are they seeing the enjoyment?
Mm. Well, that's the whole point of this conversation is because I think this it's literally marketing which is designed to overcome your natural logical thinking with your emotions. Like they don't want you thinking analytically when you buy a new phone. They don't want you to think about relative comparisons or difference. I just I think they just want to wow you and they make you think you need this. And the way that they do it is like I don't even know how it works. Obviously there are some people which are just more inclined, maybe like more consumery than others, and they like just want something new because it's new. I don't know, but it's incredible, and it's a really good example of where people do get the fucking hole ripped out of them, and it seems like the entire industry kind of might be suffering from a consumer's viewpoint just due to people's natural proclivity to get hyped about products and to buy things that are new and shiny, which is yeah, really really interesting. I think
You read the advertisements for these like new phones. Like you imagine you're like flicking through like a booklet for like the iPhone 12 or whatever the newest one's going to be, and it says something like, "Oh, the screen's now like zero point 0.7 inches bigger," and you're like, you can kind of see that. You're like, okay, if you want
sure.
the screen to be bigger, sure, but then it says like pictures clearer than ever before. A touchscreen that's more accurate than the iPhone's ever been. It's like none of these things mean anything. Like
No,
I don't know what
yeah.
you're saying. It's like bigger than before, better than before. I don't watch any of these like tech conferences where they reveal the new iPhone, but like I wonder what do they fill the hour with?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
because the phone
It's a
seems to be
long
basically the
time.
same. It's like it must be just full of like gimmicks. Like so when they put the fingerprint scanner on it, I wonder how many minutes they spent at that
Yeah, milk
conference
that for
talking
10
about
minutes
it.
on stage.
Must
Yeah,
have been
yeah.
like 10 minutes. Where like the one where they got the face recognition, and he was like, I wonder how many times he looked at his phone and it opens for him. You know what I mean? That must have been about a good 15 minutes of runtime.
Yeah. That's another one as well. I remember with the iPhone maybe 5 or 6 was where they brought out the Retina, i Retina or some shit like that, which is basically like their new screen technology, which basically, from what I understand, is it's just a new type of screen. It might be a little bit brighter, and maybe like the viewing angle's a bit better or something like that. But the phones were identical. You just had one version, which was the old screen, one version was the new screen. It's like, how do you sell that? It must be pretty damn impressive because I remember at a store with my parents, and the person that was trying to sell us the phone was trying to sell us this Retina feature. It's like this is something that actually, like, we joke about how trivial it is and how little it matters, but like it's a real tangible selling point that actually gets them, that actually works as a really viable tactic.
One of the bad things about these products as well is as the iPhones get newer, and I've got no proof or evidence for this whatsoever, but I'm fucking swear to God that screen is easier to break than it ever has been. You know, I'm fucking telling you, the amount of people that like break their iPhones, all you have to do is drop it off like, 15 centimeters to the ground, and if it hits the wrong corner or if it hits it in a specific way, it's going to break every
Yeah.
single time.
hmm
I remember like when I did have that G1 phone, it was indestructible, man. You could drop that from any height and it would dunk, and the corners were all chipped off of it. If you chip the corner of an iPhone, that screen's gonna fucking smash, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you got to pay 120 quid for the new screen or whatever it is, probably more than that. Fuck knows. But I swear they're making these things now so that you can break them, and you have to pay for like new things. Like chargers are easier to break than they ever have been. The cables inside those things are fucked the minute you bend them, sort of thing. I'm convinced these things are happening as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you as well, actually, because I mentioned I've got the new back screen, which is a holographic design, which is supposed to be like really pretty and that type of thing. I have to ask myself, like, how much value does that actually add? How much am I paying for that fucking screen? Well, the thing
it adds less value by breaking easier. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's glass. It's fucking glass. You know, I've just got an entire glass phone now. You know, like, see the iPhone 4 you mentioned. That was the best phone on earth because 3/4 of it was solid aluminium. You know, and there was a tiny little screen you could break. See this phone? See like the phones which have like this end to end screens. You know, it's cost like £400 for a new screen for this. £400 Like I can't afford that, man. I'm not doing that. It's a pisser, and that's part of the reason why I actually left Apple, because I was getting so fucking pissed off with their stupid chargers, which I am convinced are like proprietarily designed to break.
Yeah, the whole thing about Apple is as well, you're talking about like £1.50, £2 for a phone. I left Apple as well with my last phone, and the reason that I left was because I started like Googling around the market, and I was like, I don't need an iPhone. Like, there's no reason for you to have an iPhone. The only reason is like iMessage, and I'm like, I never use iMessage. I fucking hate group chats, so I leave all the group chats that I'm in. Well, basically all of them. So I started like looking around the phone, and for the phone market, sorry, and I found that it was the Google Pixel. I think it's the Google Pixel 4 I have, which wasn't the newest model at the time. The 4A was just coming out, I think. So it was like, it was almost last generation's phone, but it was like up to date with like the most recent iPhone sort of thing. It did all the same things. I think that maybe the camera was like slightly worse in it or something like that. I don't take photos anyway, so I didn't mind.
Yeah, exactly.
But the newest iPhone was like £1.50. Like, if I was to try and get a contract for it, my contract was going to go up from like £20 on my SIM only deal to like 55 or something like that a month. It was like a massive jump. And then I got this phone on like a 2-year deal for like £31 a month, and it worked out like I'm getting that phone for like 260 quid over the 2 years. The contract ends this January, and I'll only have paid 260 extra pounds, and I've got this brand new phone.
Yeah, it was goes to show you how valuable these phones must actually be if they're willing to give you it at that price for your service, man. That's absolutely crazy now to think about it. Yeah, I remember like I'm the same as you. When I went to go buy a new phone, I was like, there's no way I'm spending like, I think at the time it was like maybe the 8C or some shit had come out. It was like £900, and I was like, there's no way on earth I don't see any reason to do that. So I went for a Samsung, and I deliberately got the one which is like, it was called E for like economy, you know, as if like fucking budget class or some shit like that. And so it's just like the S10e, so it doesn't have all of the facial recognition stuff, or like one of the features that I don't have is that I just need to use a button at the side for it to recognise my fingerprint. I can't use anywhere on the screen, you know, and that saved me £600. It's like, what a fucking bargain. Buy it second hand, guys. Yeah,
but even the contract for my phone. So I looked up for the actual phone online, and the 4 at the time was like £650 for the Pixel 4. And then when I got it for a contract, it was only like an extra £250 over 2 years. So it was like, it must. I mean, the amount that I'm paying for the contract, like they must be like really overcharging you for like the minutes and the data that you use, and they're willing to give you the phone so cheap because they're seeing so much value in the SIM only part of your contract, you know. So I'm paying like 20 quid for like the text, the minutes, and the data that I've got, which is like 20 gig or something, I don't know. And then the phone itself is only like an additional £11 after that. So I'm actually paying more.
Must be nothing, yeah.
I'm like paying more to like use my phone than I am to actually buy the software, like the hardware, sorry. So the phone must not be like where they make their money, surely. Must be on like the contract where they sell you it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But to be fair, like, slightly tangential, but like when it comes to like dealing with data, like the only cost you have is a startup cost. You know, like you had to buy the server space, you have to put the satellites in fucking space, or rent the satellite from someone else. Once you've got that, then the bandwidth of information is constant. You're just like, it's fucking money hand over fist once you paid that initial price. So that makes a bit of sense. I've never thought about that before. But I've got another example. which I thought was interesting, which we started with. So when we're talking about the PS4, I thought it might be interesting to talk about hype in the gaming industry, because it's like it's ubiquitous. I think as I mentioned to you before, we started the recording today, like when I was trying to look up information about, you know, hype in the gaming industry, all I found was this pages upon pages of like dubstep lo-fi mixes, which are like mixes to listen to while waiting for your new game to come out type of thing. It's literally, you have such a thing as hype mixes, and it's like, it's something that seems to, as I said, it's ubiquitous but the gaming industry. But apparently, actually, like, hype in gaming only really started once E3 came about. You know, so like for people that don't know, E3 is like a massive. It's like the biggest gaming convention of the year, and it's basically where studios have an opportunity to get together and showcase their games and show trailers. And it always happens in July, and it started in 2002. And the idea was that this was to tide you over until, like, you know, October, November, which is when most games actually come out due to Black
The
Friday
gaming
sales.
season, yeah.
And like that gaming season has always existed then, pretty much. It's just like it's been set by the market as those months. But obviously, E3 was an idea which people came out with, which is literally just like, okay, this is going to be our event to get people excited. You know, like we're gonna remind them a couple months just beforehand, like, remember, this is the game you're saving for this year, type of thing. And it's quite interesting. It's because this is like something that's like not a theory of mine. This is like fucking Boogie, you know, the YouTuber Boogie, the big fat dude.
No, I
I'm
have
sure
no
you
idea.
recognize him. Oh, well, he did a video like talking about this 7 years ago. You know, basically there's this phenomenon in the game industry, and it kind of comes down to what you were talking about earlier as well, talking about the actual value of what you get based on like the hype. So games industries will, they like design a game, you know, and while they're in the process of designing that game, they'll go to E3 and they'll start advertising. That's all well and good. What would happen traditionally was that after you'd get hyped for the game, you get really excited and you buy your game. But these days, E3 isn't actually to do with trying to get you hyped for game sales. E3 is there to get you hyped for pre-orders. That that is the reason for E3 now. Effectively, it's because like you'll
Sure.
find that pre-orders go available pretty much immediately after E3. And what people find is that like there's a negative repercussion here, in that because like the industry are just excited. You know, people want their game, they're really fucking hyped for it, which is a naturally good thing. And games companies want to take advantage of that because it can make more sales, and like they basically take advantage to have these to make these pre-orders. What happens is that the game studios, like the game devs, aren't actually incentivized to make you finish games anymore. You know, like there's no longer the same. Like previously, if you had made a game and released it and it was shit, people wouldn't buy that game. But when you have like 60, 50 to, well, 50 to 70% of your sales in the bag already, then the way that you try and sell your game and market your game becomes completely different. And what people seem to, I think, what is basically leads to like many fuck up and cock ups. Like for instance, like Cyberpunk 2077 was like a really, really good example this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that game was like pretty much absolutely fucked when it came out. Like it was delayed like 4 times or something like that, and then when it did come out, it was like still absolutely fucked. I don't know I don't know what happened with that game, to be honest with you. But I know I used to be, when at the end of high school, I was like quite big into gaming, and I used to watch like E3 every year when it came on, like in the summer holidays. I used to put on E3, see the games that were
Yeah.
coming out, and I knew I was going to get like at least 5 or 6 of them, sort of thing. You know,
Yeah.
they would showcase the new Call of Duty, and I was like, I was going to get that, and they would showcase the new FIFA or whatever, and they
Yeah.
put
It
out
was Halo for
a,
me, but Halo and
a bunch of
FIFA
like
for
other
Forza.
games, and I guess I was like part of that hype engine. Think the reason that I fell out of it though, first of all, I think that you're right. The games companies are like less incentivized to like make you finish the game these days, and I think that's partially driven by the data actually, because they now know, because the games are all online now, they know how many people actually finish their games, and
Oh.
it's like not a lot. So I think like over half the people that like buy your game will like never finish it,
Yeah, they'll
and
finish the
that's
first level and never play it again,
yeah,
type
they
of
they
thing.
they finish like the first like
Hmm.
couple of levels, and they'll like trail off, and only like 30% of people will actually finish your game. So they're less incentivized to actually make you a full game and just to get you like in the door, sort of thing. The reason that I fell away from like the hype train though was because I don't actually mind the hype train itself, as long as what they're getting you hyped for is true.
Right.
So when I'm watching these conferences, I remember there's been a couple of examples specifically. One of them was Destiny. When Destiny came out, the hype train behind that was like huge, and
Immense. Oh
we were
my god.
super hyped for it. And then the game that came out wasn't at all what they had pitched,
No.
sort of thing. And it happened as well with the Division as well, which is another shooter that came out roughly in the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that's right.
And they like put out a trailer at E3 that made the game look out of this fucking world, and then the game
Oh,
comes out and it's just like a regular first person shooter, like just like any other
yeah, yeah.
game,
With
sort
like,
of thing.
yeah, cheap, rehearsed mechanics we've seen 1,000 times before.
Yeah, so I can, at that point when that started happening, I stopped like putting pre-orders in for these games, and I was like, I'm just gonna wait till it like comes out, because I don't want to pre-order this game, be excited for something that it totally isn't, and then it comes out and be disappointed by it, sort of thing. So I stopped watching like trailers, stopped watching E3 and things like that, and like Destiny comes out now, I don't know what's coming, I just buy it, and then whatever it is, it is. The problem I have it is when the hype train is like inherently just lying to you to get you to pre-order the game, which I think is happening now. That's one of the things you're
Oh
talking
yeah,
about when you say they're marketing the games differently. They know that once they've got your pre-order, you're like not likely to cancel that. The game will come to you on day one, and after that, it doesn't really fucking matter, because you've like shipped them a product, they've bought the product, they can't like send it back now. You've got the
yeah,
money, so
exactly.
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that is the problem here. The biggest one I see personally is that there seems to be no repercussions for what is effectively false advertising. You know,
Yeah,
if we're watching a demo of Destiny and they make out as if it's going to be like a crazy open world experience in which you're going to have like matchmaking on the fly, but it's also going to be a weird diversion fusion of this, and that. And then the game comes out and you realize that it could have quite easily been summed up with open world shooter. And you've been sold a bunch of other shit for like months and months. It is fucking bullshit, you know, and it happens time and time again. One of the most notorious examples is No Man's Sky. You know, that game was like hyped to oblivion because it was supposed to be literally, it's not unlike Destiny. You know, it was like, look up at space. You can go wherever you want. You can go to the center of the galaxy type of thing. And the game came out and it was absolute wreck. And that was one of the examples where they did have like quite a lot of negative feedback for it. But that was kind of one of the point that I was thinking about, was that the problem is that once you've bought the game, you've bought the game. They have your sale. Any other follow-up money they were going to make from that, it doesn't even matter what states the games are going to be out in, you know. And there's even further incentives these days because, like, sure, like the game might be shit once it's released, but if we can get them to buy a season pass before they even buy the game, then they're going to be playing that for the first year. That means we effectively have an entire year to get to the game to a state where it's like really nice and stable. So it's like they have so many backups where it's really, really frustrating. The way that game development companies are able to get away with what they do, and it's effectively through taking advantage of people's hype, you know, which is bullshit. Because it's supposed to be a positive thing. We're happy about this game, and a game publishing company is potentially using that to lie to you and to take advantage of your emotions.
it's what I'm always saying, right? When it comes to like money, when we're talking about how when we were young and like when we were in high school and we're watching E3, the games are still like technologically advancing to a point where they're better to play. You know, I would say over the last 5 years, maybe a bit longer than that, 5 to 10 years, games have stopped advancing any further that makes
Ah,
them any more fun to play, sort of thing. So from like maybe 1990s to I would say 2010s, like early 2010s, games jumped up every single console like iteration. They got
I'd say
better
from
and
like the
better.
'60s that happened. Yeah.
Well, sure, yeah, they got more fun to play. They were smoother. They were graphically more pleasing to look at. Nowadays, we're talking about 2021 moving into 2022. The advancements that we're seeing are like very, very small.
Mm,
So they're now finding it much more difficult to justify getting more people on board. They're not generating any more sales just by making a new game and making it awesome, because it's the same as it was before, only a different story or a different whatever. So now what they're doing is they're like marketing it in a way to get more sales, even though the games are kind of the same. They're not really delivering on any of the promises they're making, but as long as they're getting the pre-orders, they then look at the bottom line come the end
yeah,
of the year and they're like, yeah,
they're happy.
our game was dog shit. It was broken. You know, Cyberpunk was like, it was unplayable for like a large
Literally.
a large portion of the audience, but it still sold like 15 million copies in its first week or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like £60 for a copy, so you do the math. They made a lot of fucking money on the
they're
first week
happy
of that
then.
game. Yeah, they made all their money back and like more, but the game doesn't fucking work.
Yeah, that was the example I was going to go back to, but you brought it back for us. Like E3, like fucking Cyberpunk, sorry. It was like the most pre-ordered game ever, And looking back, we really have to ask ourselves, was it just because of Keanu Reeves? Was it literally because of that one guy? It's because there was nothing else about that game that looks enticing. Like they spent hundreds of millions in marketing. And by the way, I think that might actually feed into this horrible development cycle we have right now. It's because games are spending hundreds of millions in marketing and then trying to produce a game for a set date. They have several million pre-orders, so they're less incentivized to keep pushing that date back, but they've spent all their money in advertising, which they didn't spend in development type of thing. Which I think it does seem to be that there is a problem that that games are now shifting around where they actually what they put their money, which is the same as basically saying their priorities have shifted, which is unsurprising in a way. Basically, once they've got the money, they're fucking laughing and they're just going to ride you for as long as you can. And it's what you just said earlier. It's so obvious, this one, don't pre-order games. There's no reason to pre-order games these days. There's literally no reason, because you download games, Not many people buy physical copies of games. Why are you doing this? It's just...
It's like you're pre-ordering... Like surely the whole aspect of pre-ordering it is that so that you make sure you get your copy on day one.
On day one, right?
But people are now pre-ordering them on the PlayStation Store, which is like a digital marketplace. You get a code for a download. It's like there's no like there's no shortage of copies that are like on the internet. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's maybe for the PS5, for example, where there was a shot. This is a hardware. This gets sent out to your house.
Sure, that makes sense. Right?
I realise I'm putting my hand over here all the time. My PS5 is next to me. I'm touching it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm like looking over and I'm like, my PS5.
Ashes.
There's like, this is a hardware. It's like something that gets sent out to your house, There's a reason to pre-order that because there's only a certain number of these, whereas there's not a certain number of codes for you to download this game on like online, And I'm wondering if there's is there like an agency that deals with like an audit agency for gaming companies that like look back at like trailers and stuff like that, because that's the first thing I see in every trailer nowadays. It's like this is not represent like actual footage of the in-game activity or the in-game experience or whatever, and it's like, is that just a disclaimer for you to say this trailer's not for the game because it's not what's going to be in it?
I think the thing is that like if you're advertising while the game is still under development, then you can basically say, you can come up with any reason to say
anything
that's why the game didn't finish up. You could say, oh, just due to resources, this and this, we had to change your features. They can do whatever the fuck they want, because there have been investigations into games that have effectively missold people things. Like, as I said, No Man's Sky is a really obvious one. Division, there's another one. Who
does the money go to though?
What do you mean?
If they like, so I remember Cyberpunk, once it came out and it was all broken to fuck and people complained a lot, there was like a lot of things going around, like there was going to be like a lawsuit for it. So someone was trying to sue them, and it's like, well, who gets that money then once that happens? Like, because I remember there was a big thing about you can get that game refunded, but I don't see like that happening often. The games come out all the time that aren't what they were promised, but like money doesn't get given back, and it's like, well, there's a lawsuit for it, and it's like, well, who's suing who? Obviously someone's suing the game company, but who's doing it? Like, are you going to distribute this money? I don't think so. Like, who's doing that?
No, it is an individual. Yeah. And the individual basically is someone that has the funds, that is willing to take a risk that they'll win this case. Because obviously, like it's in the case in the UK. I assume it's the case in America. If you win, then you don't pay court fees, type of thing. So I guess it's just people because like Cyberpunk, you'll find that 150 people tried to sue. Those are literally just individuals, I think, that are willing to go to court over it, and no, they will not be fucking divvying up the money. Certainly not. So it just stays in their pocket.
Well, yeah, that seems equally as horrible. But yeah, you're right. There's no reason to pre-order games anymore at all, is there? You shouldn't be worried about a shortage. A pre-order is so you can make sure you guarantee your copy, and like on games these days, you're guaranteed your copy, especially if you buy it digitally. Like pre-ordering a digital item makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, well, it's what I'm talking about, man. It's it's highly irrational. It's the hype controlling your fingers. You don't know what you're doing. You just it's something about it. See being excited about something. It's unbelievable the effect it actually has on your willingness to do something about that and purchase it. For example, it's a great example. The one last example I have to talk about, which is almost kind of obvious actually, is to talk about hype beast brands. And do you know what I mean by that?
I don't think so.
Hype beast or streetwear?
No, I don't
Okay.
think so.
Well, like,
Oh, maybe I do actually. Are you talking about like when a brand will like bring out a limited edition, like 300 copies of a shoe or something like that?
sure, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Hype beasts themselves. This actually used to be a derogatory term for people that used to slavishly follow brands and labels because of price and prestige. That's literally what
Sure.
it was. And then these days, that's actually become a thing that people call themselves with pride. It's not different. It's the same. It's people that basically like to buy expensive brands that are covered in designer labels with the sole intention of impressing other people. And the reason they're called hype beasts is because they follow the hype. They look at whatever's in trend, and the way that things become in trend is literally by celebrities wearing them. They're kind of the polar opposite. Hype beasts are the polar opposite of hipsters because hypebeasts solely emulate looks that they see. Like there's actually like a meme in the hypebeast community about how every look that you wear is absolute dog shit until a celebrity wears it the next day. In which case, like the value of it triples overnight type of thing, and that's like the coolest fucking gear you can get on the streets. But it's literally just because famous person X wore it one day.
Yeah, yeah.
Hypebeast brands, they're exactly like you said. They tend to be like fashion outlets that take advantage of various marketing techniques in order to create a false sense of demand.
Demand, yeah.
Demand, yes, by increasing artificial scarcity. So like FOMO and that type of thing. I think you've heard Supreme.
Yes, that was the brand I thought of actually because I remember one of the guys that I had, it was in one of my uni project groups. He used to, so I know there are people that like buy this stuff and wear it themselves. He was like a secondary person
Flipper.
to that. Well, that must be the word for it, a
Yeah.
flipper. He went, followed the trends, bought the stuff, and then resold it. I'm not sure if he made, I guess he must have made some
You
money
will have,
for
you
it.
will have made money, yeah.
And I'm not sure if the money comes from the fact that you're willing to wait while other people won't, or if it's in the resale value, or both. I've no idea.
Well, it's mental, man. Mental. As I said, like, so they use these three things. They use collaborations, they use celebrity endorsements, and they use scarcity. So the celebrity endorsements is pretty obvious because we're talking about people that are basing their looks off of what celebrity wears. So if someone pays Billie Eilish 300 grand to wear a pair of Timbies and a Louis Vuitton jacket out to the shops one day, next day you'll find that will be selling more within the hypebeast communities. Collaborations is basically, it's kind of a way that these brands, hypebeast brands, fashion outlets, develop a degree of prestige, basically. Because like any company that has a collaboration with Louis Vuitton, that's a serious fucking company, you know. Like any company that has a collaboration with Armani or fucking Rolex or whatever, that's like a pretty serious company. But obviously, Supreme take it to the nth degree, where they've pretty much collaborated with every planet on Earth now. Every planet on Earth, every company on Earth. The one, the full one. Like I have a couple of examples of ridiculous collaborations which I thought were pretty funny. They've collaborated to make wire cutters, Supreme wire cutters. They've
Nice.
collaborated to make a lock, like a padlock. They've collaborated, obviously, a brick was really, really popular. That was really popular. And you could buy a $30 Supreme brick or buy it in a secondhand market for $200. And there's like staplers, random shit. The really famous one, which got headlines because folk were like, why, was the Supreme Oreo, which is a 3 packet of Supreme Oreos that were red that went for £92,000 on eBay. They were bought for a couple $100, but the second-hand market they were sold for 92 grand, and that's basically because Supreme are effectively collector's items. Like they're no longer a fashion outlet; they
Yeah, yeah.
sell collector goods now. And that's what's quite cool about it is that naturally these products end up getting really, really, really high second-hand values, and you get introduction of like flippers and stuff like that. Like you said, it's really weird, man, because like the way that they do it is basically to try to make it as difficult for you as possible to buy their products. So see if you
Yeah.
actually want to. Have you ever heard of the process that you need to go through to buy something from Supreme?
Oh no, I've never looked it up or anything like that. No, I just know that it sounds ridiculously stupid, so I've never like looked into it.
Yeah, yeah. Like you basically like in order to buy something from Supreme, first of all you need to enter a lottery. You know, you need to put in your fucking name and email address every Tuesday because every Tuesday they bring out their new stock. Then, however, based on however many people they allow into the shops that day, you'll get randomly selected. You'll have to get a location to a shop to turn up to and a time of day that you're allowed to turn up there. Once you enter the shop, there's a maximum limit to the number of items you can buy. And if you buy one item, you can only buy it in that color. You can't get like a blue top with one design and a red top with one design. So they basically limit the amount of things you can walk out the shop for. So it's super like the scarcity, they go fucking overboard, and naturally like there are like queues down entire towns because there's people just trying to get into Supreme. And exactly like you said, see if you were to ever see one of these queues, the majority of people in those queues aren't there to buy items. They're being paid by someone that wants to get that and sell it in a second-hand market because they'll be taking into account the profit they can make on top of it. Like it's amazing actually. And it's just like it's because what we have is a genuine marketplace that's formed as a result of hypebeast brands. I've seen like websites which basically just have a bunch of items and people speculate on the price of it based on how much they like the look. So if there's something new comes out of Supreme, people will vote from 1 to 10 and say how much you like this. If the average score is 8.5, the community arbitrarily assign this a second-hand value more than the original retailer's price, you know? And this is how it works. It's literally, it's almost like stocks at this stage. It's because we're talking about speculation giving value where there might actually be no value there. And it's just, I find it amazing, man. Absolutely amazing.
See, in this instance, we've gotten to the point now where like I realise how ridiculously stupid this is. The whole hype marketing for all of these reasons. The technology ones are bad because there's no innovation. The gaming industry one's bad because there's no point in fucking having pre-ordering a digital item.
Yeah,
And even the hardware, like the PS5, there's no fucking games for it right now, so you might as well just wait until it's readily available. When you're talking about clothes, it's like, again, it's just so that you can have like a brand on your piece of clothing. Like
it's, I don't, yeah.
You just want it because it's like rare. There's no, like, I see at this point, it's almost like if you're stupid enough to spend your money on this stuff, you deserve to lose that amount of money. You know what I mean?
I know, yeah. That's kind of a takeaway I had. It's like, but actually, before I get onto that, like, see the way that they romanticize hypebeast culture is fucking toxic. By the way, I remember I was reading about a couple of things that, like, you know, because that's what they refer to. It's not called the hypebeast life. It's called hypebeast culture. You know, and like they talk about, oh, it's not about the purchase or the money you spend. It's about the story that goes behind that purchase. You know, it's not about just walking into a store. It's about standing for hours in a queue to get in that store. You know, it's like you're fucking commercializing rampant consumerism. That's all this is right now. This is just people that are spending money. How do I even describe it, man? It's like, it's literally, we'll just come up with marketing techniques that are so clever that will convince people to assign value where there is none. And it's the worst type of person. It's the type of person that just wants to spend money cause they can, absolutely on the flip of a coin.
You're not even convincing people that what you have has like any value. You're just convincing them to spend more of their money on the same product you've always had. Like the clothes have always been there. You're just convincing someone to spend more money for it. The games have always been there. You're just convincing more people to pre-order it. Like the phones aren't getting any better. You're just convincing people to spend more money on them. Like,
Yeah.
that's all it is. It's because there's no more advancements to be made in these areas. Technologically, they've gone as far as they can go justifiably to get you to spend more money. So they're just convincing you to spend more money on the same.
Yeah. The thing, that's the thing. Like, my main takeaway is that I kind of can't help but feel at the end of the day, even regardless of all this, it's kind of up to the individual. You have a responsibility to make sure that you don't fall for the hype. But at the same time, I can't help but feel that what we're seeing here is a form of like market manipulation, and it's just kind of shady. You know, I don't really like it. But at the end of the day, people that do go out and buy a brand new console when there's no games to play, or buy a new phone every iteration, or go out and spend fucking £700 on a Supreme can opener, you're a bit of an idiot. It's kind of a tough one. That's when I said at the start of this conversation, I don't know how relevant this is. I don't know how important it is. It's because it's something that's always going to happen, and people are going to keep doing it. I don't know.
Yeah, the part of me that doesn't get it is the part that what sees these people like standing in line or waiting in line. Maybe if you're a flipper and you're like making money for it, okay, I can kind of see how you can justify like waiting all that time because you're like,
Sure.
it's sort of like a job at that point.
Yeah.
But the people that actually stand in the queues and do all these things themselves, it's like you're willing to waste that much of your life to get like a jumper or a hat or a shoe, and it's like the only people that are going to appreciate this shoe are the people in this queue.
Right,
and it's like, how
exactly.
often are you going to meet them in real life? It's like
Yeah.
the whole thing seems like not worth the time, not worth the money. But I guess these people must see the value in the things they do. They must see the value in just owning an item like that.
Yeah.
I can't explain it, but I guess if that's what they want to spend their money on, and in my opinion, waste their time on, obviously they don't see it as a waste, but if that's what they want to do, then yeah, go right ahead. But it's definitely not something I'd encourage, or it's something that I'd like actively look over and be like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah. I don't know if it's possible or not, but maybe the takeaway message would be to try and be aware of how much your purchasing decisions are being based on emotion that way. I don't know if that's something people will actually do or whether it's possible or not. I kind of can't help but feel that the type of people that are doing these things and falling for the hype are always going to do that. And don't get me wrong, everyone gets caught up on it once in a while. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Just maybe have a little bit of awareness. Don't be a fucking moron, but see if you are, I'm just going to let you do your things. It's not actually hurting me. It could be hurting the industry, but we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, maybe one last thing to say is the way I think about it is when I look at these things that are like £1,000, like you're talking about £700 for a jumper or whatever. Look at that and then compare it to like other things in your life,
Right.
where it's like, how much of my deposit on a house is this going to be? You know what I mean? Like, how much is this going to be on for a new car or like any of these things? Like, you're spending so much money on this consumerist things, and I think phones are probably the worst one this way, when like especially people in our generation are like, how are we supposed to afford anything now? And it's like the first question that I ask when anyone says that they're skint is, what phone do you have?
Right.
And it's like,
Yeah.
as soon as they're like, oh, I've got the iPhone 11, it's well,
Yeah, if it's a flagship, then
I can see why you can't afford anything. Like, I look outside, if one of my friends is like, I'm skint right now, I can't afford anything, I'm looking outside to see their car and they've got like a brand new Range Rover or like a BMW like in the driveway. They haven't, like, when I bought my car, I could have probably afforded a fancy car, but I got like a practical one that was maybe a bit more than I would have liked to have spent, but it was like easily within my budget, wasn't going to break the bank, had it paid off in 18 months, and then after that I was scot free. Whereas you see some people that go on for like 4 and 5 years paying away on this car, like way more money than they had to pay for it. I'm skint every single month, and it's like, just have a look at the things that you're buying and
because please
weigh that up with things you're doing. Like, if you're spending £500 a month on a car, or if you're spending like $2,000 on a phone, and then you can't afford to do something with your friends at the weekend, it's like you've chosen to give that up.
Yeah, you need to reassess your priorities.
Exactly. Just be a bit more mindful and like maybe weigh it up against other things in your life, and that'll give you a bit of perspective on the amount of money you actually are spending.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was me this week. I thought it was quite an interesting one. I'm glad it worked out. Actually, I was kind of hoping for that over arc and the three subtopics, and